Yes, well, Peter, as all of you know, is the leading spirit behind Rejoin marches, behind keeping alive the question of rejoining the European Union in the way of a movement rather than a political party. Please, we're very grateful to you, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Hello, I'm Peter Corr, and I am the co-founder of National Rejoin March. Myself and Lee Rudd, who you will have seen on stage hosting the marches in London, founded it in 2020 as a pro-Rejoin campaign stage for all of us to campaign on. So I see it as well than a campaign.
Can you hear me in the back? Oh, that's a horrible on the microphone.
Yes. It's great.
So it's meant to be a platform for all of us to campaign on. So we don't technically have our own stance on things. The campaign comes from you guys and the groups that you are in. Because I only came into this in 2020, and a lot of you have been doing this for a lot longer than me. So it's meant as a platform for all of us to campaign on. But our goal is to rejoin and to put it on the agenda and then keep it there until we are back in the EU. We want the word rejoin to become as mainstream as the word Brexit did. Well, I should put that at the end because that music is really epic and I'm not epic. But anyway, so it started really as me annoying my family on my Facebook page to the point where everyone was ignoring me. So I turned it into a group which absolutely ballooned into over 20,000 members who were very active in the group, but then COVID started. The whole time COVID and lockdown was going on, people were telling us over and over that we should be on the streets protesting about what's going on since we left in 2020, and I agree. So literally the day after lockdown lifted, we put in permissions to the GLA and got the ball rolling. So what we're doing is direct action, which is a type of public protest to achieve a change in society, and it takes many forms, from strikes to demonstrations to marches and blockades to pickets property damage, maybe. We're not doing that though. It might even include creating a political party with one aim to achieve change in Parliament. So, but has it ever worked? Everyone put your hands up for me. Just put your hands up, everybody, for me now, please. In the air. Now put your hands down if you are a woman who's ever voted. Put your hands down if you're a man who knows a woman who has ever voted. So no hands are left up. So everyone in here has witnessed protests working, because there were many, many protests, as we all know, the women's suffragettes movement, who had deeds not words as their motto, who protested over many years to get women the vote. And it started by granting women the right to vote who were over 30 and had property rights. And then it granted women the right to stand in Parliament in 1918, and then in 1928 finally giving equal voting rights to women. You had the blind marches, which was 250 people who were blind that marched from across the UK to Trafalgar Square and protested against poor working conditions and poverty experienced by blind people. And that created in 1920 the Blind Persons Act, which was actually the first disability-specific legislation in the world. You have the Gay Liberation Front, who protested from the 60s onwards until this very day. And you had the first Gay Pride March in 1972. And that's created all kinds of stuff in Parliament, from the decriminalised private homosexual acts for men over 21. Close to me is the ban on lesbian, gay and bisexual people serving in the army, which was actually only lifted in 2003. The Civil Partnerships Act in 2004, the Gender Recognition Act in 2005, the Equality Act in 2010, and amazingly to me, in only 2013, same-sex marriage. It's amazing to me that it took that long to get recognised. You had hunger marches, so hundreds of thousands of unemployed people marching from the 1930s right up until the war about extremely low dole payments leading to extreme poverty. One of the biggest in Hyde Park that happened, actually, the government at the time told the marchers that their already low dole payments were going to be reduced that week because they'd made themselves unavailable to work. Guess what party was in power at that time? It actually wasn't. And then finally in 1936, the Jarrow Hunger March led to the change that came in after World War II. It created much public sympathy and support and gave us great social reforms such as social security and even the creation of the NHS. So that's just a few examples, and there's lots and lots and lots and lots more from across history and across the world where protests have changed many, many causes, all of which have contributed to the relatively free and liberal country that we have here.
We live in an age of protest. On campuses, in public squares, on streets and social media, protesters around the world are challenging the status quo. Protests can thrust issues onto the national or global agenda. It can force out tyrants. It can activate people who have long been on the sidelines of civic life. But while protest is often necessary, is it sufficient? Consider the Arab Spring. All across the Middle East, citizen protesters were able to topple dictators. Afterwards, though, the vacuum was too often filled by the most militant and violent. Protest can generate lasting positive change when it's followed by an equally passionate effort to mobilize voters, to cast ballots, to understand government, and to make it more inclusive. So here are 3 core strategies for peacefully turning awareness into action and protest into durable political power. First, expand the frame of the possible. Second, choose a defining fight. And third, find an early win. Let's start with expanding the frame of the possible. How often have you heard, in response to a policy idea, "That's just never going to happen"? When you hear someone say that, they're trying to define the boundaries of your civic imagination. The powerful citizen works to push those boundaries outward, to ask, what if? What if it were possible? What if enough forms of power, people power, ideas, money, social norms, were aligned to make it happen? Simply asking that question, and not taking as given all the givens of conventional politics, is the first step in converting protest to power. But this requires concreteness about what it would look like to have, say, a radically smaller national government, or, by contrast, a big single-payer healthcare system. A way to hold corporations accountable for their misdeeds, or, instead, a way to free them from onerous regulations. This brings us to the second strategy, choosing a defining fight. All politics is about contrasts. Few of us think about civic life in the abstract. We think about things in relief, compared to something else. Powerful citizens set the terms of that contrast. This doesn't mean being uncivil. It simply means thinking about a debate you want to have on your terms, over an issue that captures the essence of the change you want. This is what the activists pushing for a $15 minimum wage in the US have done. They don't pretend that $15 by itself can fix inequality, but with this ambitious and contentious goal, which they achieved first in Seattle and then beyond, they have forced a bigger debate about economic justice and prosperity. They've expanded the frame of the possible, Strategy 1, and created a sharp, emblematic contrast, Strategy 2. The third key strategy, then, is to seek and achieve an early win. An early win, even if it's not as ambitious as the ultimate goal, creates momentum, which changes what people think is possible. The Solidarity movement, which organized workers in Cold War Poland, emerged just this way. First with local shipyard strikes in 1980 that forced concessions. Then, over the next decade, a nationwide effort that ultimately helped topple Poland's communist government. Getting early wins sets in motion a positive feedback loop, a contagion of belief and motivation. It requires pressuring policymakers, using the media to change narrative, making arguments in public, persuading skeptical neighbors one by one by one. None of this is as sexy as a protest, but this is the history of the US civil rights movement, of Indian independence, of Czech self-determination. Not the single sudden triumph, but the long, slow slog. You don't have to be anyone special to be part of this grind, to expand the frame of the possible, to pick a defining fight, or to secure an early win. You just have to be a participant and to live like a citizen. The spirit of protest is powerful. So is showing up after the protest. You can be the co-creator of what comes next.
So why isn't protest working from 2016? Because the governments of all colours so far have basically been ignoring not just the Rejoin movement, but Black Lives Matter and many other campaigns that have been running lately. I think it's because popular opinion has been sufficiently embedded by liars from literally decades of the British media drip-feeding lies into the public's mind, especially for pro-EU campaigns. So every time there was a domestic problem and they needed to protect politicians from criticism, they'd blame the EU instead. And in between blaming the EU for certain problems, they'd report all kinds of nonsense, such as the bendy bananas, or make good things seem bad, such as trying to reduce the power that washing machines use. Most normal people simply could not or did not have the time to find out if any of this was true or not, myself included. I'm a lorry driver. I'm not a politician or a journalist or a campaigner or someone who does speeches, in case you can't tell. And I know this from my time in the army, from sitting in Germany, pre-internet, pre-age of information, where newspapers were pretty much our only connection to home. So reading stories about the army that were clearly wrong, to be generous, and had the aim of making politician or government X look bad. You could almost say that the newspapers are another form of protest when they're not just printing truthful news stories. So all these years, and it turns out the newspapers have just been a protest group. if you think about it. All this has left the country in a quite confused state, surrounded by misinformation, especially online, about all kinds of topics, from race to religion to the EU, especially in this country, and the government of the last 15 plus years have tried as much as possible to ignore most, if not all, of these protests. Right now we're in two bubbles in this country, the way I see it. It stems from 2016, all of it, in my view. You voted Remain. You probably like Harry and Meghan. You probably think gay rights have not gone too far. You probably believe in climate change. And if you voted Leave, you probably hate Harry and Meghan. You probably think gay rights are going too far. You might even be against the vaccines and thinking that microchips are going in us. Maybe you even think the earth is flat. Not always, but if you put a bet on it, you might get some money back if you bet on those things. So what I think we should do is work on making unpopular opinions popular. What I mean by that is in November 2024, Best for Britain did some pretty extensive polling, and which I think had some really interesting results for us as rejoiners. Without going into all the boring numbers, I can tell you the important things, which is when asked if we wanted to get closer to the USA with a trade deal or get closer back to the EU, by far, we want to get closer back to the EU. We do not want a trade deal with the USA. As Liz said earlier, it's going to really hurt this country if we do end up with a USA trade deal in lots of ways. And more recent polling was concentrating on what getting closer back to the EU actually means. So it was popular with more people polling, we want to get back closer to the EU. However, as soon as you bring certain factors in, such as immigration or the Euro or the European Court of Justice into it, the popularity of getting close to the EU went down. So how do we counter this? Some people, when we saw those poll results, said, well, we should avoid using those subjects while we're campaigning there. So avoid talking about the Euro or avoid talking about immigration and concentrate on the bits that were already popular. But I think the opposite. I think all of those subjects that do not dent the opinion of getting close to the EU is a waste of time campaigning on those because they're already popular. We should obviously keep highlighting them, but we cannot ignore what's unpopular and try to hide it. Arguably, that's what led to Brexit in the first place. Instead, we should really tackle them head on and develop positive mini campaigns for the unpopular opinions. So I do it myself a bit because, as I say, I'm a lorry driver and I speak to a lot of people in my sector that are anti-EU, anti-immigration and all the rest of it. So on immigration, I think people don't really think about it all the good that has come from multiculturalism in this country, and they certainly fail to connect it to their everyday lives, which is what I think is the important thing we have to do, connect it to people's everyday lives. So not just about, what about the Indian restaurant up the road or whatever, things like that. I mean, really connect it to their lives. So I'm a DJ and music producer I used to be in what spare time I used to have until I started doing this. And I really love hip-hop, house music, drum and bass, and those sort of genres. And these genres have a following that is almost treated like a religion. So when I started seeing people in these genres or our religion of drum and bass, for example, being anti-immigration, I just reminded them that drum and bass actually comes from house music, and house music comes from Frankie Knuckles in Chicago, and it's very much a music of black origin and comes from immigration to this country. And when you remind them that if we didn't have immigration in this country back in the early 90s, for example, then drum and bass wouldn't exist. So when you tell them that something they love would not have existed if it wasn't for immigration, it does connect to them in a way that talking about numbers or small boats generally doesn't. So that's just one example on immigration, because it really does work. And the Euro, for example, I think people are nostalgic about the British pound because, you know, it's got the Queen's head on it. But the King's in now, isn't he? And he's nowhere near as popular, so that side of the Euro debate is going to naturally die down, I think. And I don't know about you guys, but certainly people my age and below don't really use cash much anymore. We're using contactless and banking apps, so we don't even see the notes. So that nostalgia side of it, seeing the Queen or King's head on it, is almost gone, and certainly will carry on diminishing. And when I'm looking at the balance on my app, I'm looking at the number. I'm not looking at the symbol in front of or behind it. I live week to week, so I get paid weekly, and if I don't work, I don't get paid. If I don't get paid, I can't pay my rent or my bills. So when I'm looking at my banking app, I'm looking at the number, and can I pay my bills with that number? And if there's anything left over, can I get a McDonald's or something? I don't care what the symbol is in front of or behind it. And I don't understand why people do, to be honest with you. And I think we can, every time I say this to people, they do tend to agree with me. That when you're looking at your balance, what are you looking at, the number or the symbol? As long as the number is buying what you need to buy and paying your bills, who cares what that symbol is in front or behind it? Does anyone here, honestly, when you're looking at put your hand up, if you're looking at your balance in your bank, do you care more about the number and what you can buy with it, or the symbol?
And
No one.
don't forget it's 20% bigger if it's in euros.
Yes.
It's a bigger number.
That too, yeah, 100%. So let's just campaign on that, things like that. It might sound simple to go on things like that, because I know you've got, you know, you want to keep your own control of your monetary, blah, blah, blah. But most people are not thinking about it like that. I'm telling you now, they're just not. They're thinking about it like I am. Is this going to pay my bills? And is joining the euro actually going to make it easier or harder to pay my bills? It's going to make it easier. We know that. Any economist would tell you that. So let's just campaign on that. And with Trump showing how fast and easily the USA can turn against its allies at any time, the US dollar is used all around the world as the bar, isn't it? How about we join the EU, join the euro, and work on making the euro the bar around the world instead, so that we don't have to rely on the USA flip-flopping every 4 or 5 years, because the EU is much more stable because we're a big collection of countries who all work together in the parliament. So I'll skip past the rest of it, but there is lots of other things. It's just keep it simple. Keep it simple, connect it to real people's lives is all I'd say. Same with the European Court of Justice. If you go out on the street and ask people what the European Court of Justice is, they don't know. It's as simple as that. Now, when they say I don't know, refrain from, slapping them. Just learn what it is yourself, and again, simplify it, make it simple, and tell them what it is, and then ask them again. So when Bedford Britain was asking people, do you want to get close to the EU? And they said yes, and they said, right, well, how about if we have to follow the ECJ? Then they said, no. More people said no then. At that point, ask them what the ECJ is. If they don't know, say, well, why did your opinion go down over something you don't know about? And then tell them what it is, and then ask them again. Simplify it, keep it really simple. And then if they still say no at the end of it, then you can give them a slap, I suppose. So that's what it's like for me anyway. But as I say, National Joy March itself doesn't do that kind of campaigning. It's up to you guys to do that, which I know you all do really well, because I see you doing it all the time. But what is National Joy March doing this year and beyond? So starting today, we've got this. On Monday, there's the Rejoin debate in Parliament, which I've been invited to. And if any of you guys are around, please come and join a group of us outside of Parliament who are going to be giving support for Rejoin as the MPs go in, as many as possible, hopefully. On Friday the 28th, so next week, we're doing a protest outside the Reform Conference in Birmingham. We want as many people to come to that with us as possible too. We're going to speak to reform voters in the queue and see what we can. And then you've got the UK-EU summit coming up on Monday the 19th. We don't know where it's going to be yet, but we want to do a positive, not a protest, but something positive there to welcome the EU leaders and tell them we want to join. And then in September, I can't tell you the date yet unfortunately, but September we're doing National Rejoin March 4. We've got a brand new start point, which is Temple Underground Station, and we're going to march over 2 bridges over the Thames and up Whitehall onto Trafalgar Square this time, which is where the rally will be, so we don't have to deal with that Glastonbury-style grass anymore. And it's also got public toilets there, and we're going to have a load of fresh new faces from NRM Youth, which is what we just set up, and over 60 people have registered with already. And they are basically their own thing, who are going to come up with their own events and their own speakers. So that's what we're going to do this year. Please go on the website marchforjoin.co.uk and you can find out, keep up to date all the time. So I'm out of time now. Do you want to take any questions? Or?
I think we need to go to lunch.
Yeah, we'll go to lunch.